Indaba. And this, of course, where knowledge grows. And we anticipate another interesting discussion coming up this evening where they look at the viewpoint, the report on the 2025 summit of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC. And of course, the featured discussion today has to do with Guyanese oil and the increased U.S. militarism in the Southern Caribbean. So, another heavy topic, and that is, of course, being discussed, and not just on this program, but all over, where people are, in a sense, looking for answers, hoping that they will, in fact, get the kind of clarity and assurances, if you know what I mean. And it's really just how you feel about certain things. So the more information you get, the better you can assess and certainly do what you think is best at this point in time. So we're just standing by to join the team, and hopefully we'll be able to get to them in a short. Hey, let me know. Cross over to the team. And again, big discussion here this evening as we talk about the Guyanese oil and the increased U.S. militarism in the Southern Caribbean, among other things. And but we joined Dr. Fergus. Renee Francois is there as well. As I said, very good evening to both of you.
Good evening, my brother Russ King at Talk City 91.1 FM. Good evening, my sister Renee. And of course, good evening and good morning, wherever you might be, to our listeners on 91.1 FM on the Emancipation Support Committee's Facebook and YouTube pages. Welcome again to another edition of Indaba program under the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, we always say a place where knowledge grows. And this evening, of course, as you have heard from Russ King, we are going to focus on another dimension of the ongoing crisis in the Caribbean. We're going to hear a voice from Guyana, and of course, a little bit about the recent politics, the recent elections, general elections in Guyana, which produced some unusual results, I should say, some unusual results which should be of concern to the African diaspora community in Guyana. So let me take a quick look at the program here. This evening we have a report from the Emancipation Support Committee, an update on the history quiz. This is African History Month in Trinidad and Tobago. So we have a report on the history quiz and spoken word competitions. Those are going full steam ahead. We are approaching the semifinals. So we'll have a full report on that. And we are expecting to hear from our brother Shabaka on the CELAC conference in Colombia, I believe, in Colombia. And hopefully we can connect with him and find out what's going on there. Good evening, my sister Renee. How are you doing?
Hi, good evening.
By the way. Yes, I'm Claudia's Fergus.
Yes. Hi, good evening, Dr. Fergus. Good evening, Ruskin, and to all our viewers on our social media platforms and on radio. It's nice to join you all again tonight. I'm very interested and excited about the topics that we've been covering of late, because I do believe that our public needs to be adequately informed about what's going on in our region and on the international front as well. But once you permit, Dr. Fergus, before we go into the feature discussion, I'll go ahead and do a very brief report from the Secretariat. Yes?
Yes, and of course, our viewers and listeners can communicate with us at those numbers scrolling at the bottom of the screen there. Take note of them. You can text us Or you can leave a voice message on WhatsApp for us. If so, keep it down to about 90 seconds. And we will try our best to engage you and, if necessary, put those questions or comments to our guests. Yes, Renee, your report.
Yeah, so I don't have a particularly long report, but I would say it's very exciting because we are officially, I think it was mentioned last week on the Indaba program, we are officially in African History Month. We celebrate African History Month in the month of November here in Trinidad and Tobago. And ESCTT, between October into November, we host our National African History Quiz and spoken word competition. This year, every year is exciting, and it's exciting for different reasons. We have some really accomplished and talented and very intelligent children and schools taking part. Would just highlight a few. By no means is this all the schools that are taking part. We had CIC, St. Francois, South Secondary, San Fernando West Secondary, Arima North, Corpus Christi. Yeah, so we have quite a number of secondary schools. Some of them are veterans in the game. They have been taking part in the competition since ESC established this competition. And even though this year we made a decision to move from that tic-tac-toe element or dynamic to the game, they are adjusting well to the Jeopardy format. And to, again, ensure that the game continues to be exciting and children have to continue to, in addition to learn their work, learn the content in the booklet that we prepare, but that they also have to strategize and really sort of develop those teamwork skills, sorry. We added this element of wager where the children can wager a certain amount of points in the team question portion of the game. Some children, some schools, I should say, daring and they're wagering a lot of points, hundreds, 200s, and then you have some schools who are just wagering the 50 points because they don't want to try to lose any points, unnecessary points, and what we have kind of seen. I hope the judges don't frown when I say this, that a lot of the schools that who are winning in the game, they are wagering the least amount of points because they already have the points. They just trying to play out the game. So it's exciting. I must say that every year we continue to see young persons who have really good team spirit. So they are very cooperative and welcoming and just positive engagement between the schools, not just the teams for each school, but between the schools. And that's something that we really applaud, and it just shows the level of maturity that these children are coming with when they come to these competitions. So that's just the National African History Quiz, but we cannot forget the little one. So we have our spoken word competition. Um, this year, it was, again, we've been trying to change and upgrade and develop the competition as we go along. And so this year we decided to reintroduce stories in the national spoken word competition. We continue to offer stories at the regional level, but at the national level, we wanted to reintroduce it. And I'm really happy because one of the things I was fortunate enough to be tasked with was get some stories for our team to look at to choose to put in the booklet. One of the stories I chose was that I found was selected. It's supposed to be a true story reflective of someone's encounter with a larger bless in Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the students, I believe, is performing it, and they're doing very, very well. Not as scary. I think they kind of wanted to play down the scary element, but it's still an enjoyable piece. And of course, we have our amazing calypsos being recited. So when it comes to the little ones and that spoken word competition, it's a nice way to see our children, younger generation in particular, engage with our culture. I also was happy to see that some of our folklore was included in the booklet because in October, Trinidad and Tobago also observes folklore. That's when we kind of celebrate our national and to some degree regional folklore. So it's I think it's high stakes both at the African History Quiz and at the spoken word competition. I have my favorites. I'm not saying who my favorite is. I don't know if Dr. Fergus knows who's my favorite. But I have my favorites, and fingers crossed they will continue to perform well and advance. So, yes. Dr. Fergus, well, no, you can't tell me if you have any favorites. So,
No, if I no, I wouldn't even want to say if I have. But actually, I don't. I don't. But of course, the competition is getting keener as it normally does, approaching the quarter and the semifinals. I think the students are learning the game. They are learning the game as they go along, particularly in terms of that wagering component of the game. I think they are learning the little tricks in the game. But you talked about a real life experience with a larger bless. I couldn't help smiling. So, have you ever had that encounter, or are there still larger blessings around? You think, or
I
are
will.
there?
Right. So, where I found these stories that I provided for the team to select from is the I think it's the San Fernando library, Nalis. They have this little program where they interview people from within the community, well, mostly southern parts of Trinidad and Tobago, well, mostly southern parts of Trinidad, I should say, and they tell about their, different encounters, whether it's a larger blast or a sukene or a duan, I forget what you call the other character that's supposed to be almost like a werewolf. And so I spent a lot of my lunchtime reading those stories while I have lunch. And so when they were like, "Oh, we were looking for story," I was too excited to put the team on to this very unique program. I think what they are doing there at that particular Nalos is really amazing. They're keeping our culture alive. They're giving our elders in those communities a voice, and it's just something fun and engaging. I don't know that I believe in folklore like that because I have really sort of just grown up in like city center areas. So I have not had any experiences for which I'm very grateful.
Well, I grew up in the rural areas, and those things were always part of our growing up experience. Not that you might have seen, but you were always concerned and hoping not to see. As a matter of fact, once you were out late, for example, and returning home, you were always wondering whether you might or might not encounter one of these folklore characters. And of course, there are so many of them, and they're all part of our growing up. So it's good that those things have been revived, at least in the spoken word competition. It's important that we know those stories. And of course, some people would swear that they are still around somewhere. My mother, for example, up to the end of her life, believed that those things were real and that she have seen some of them. That she have seen some of them. So I cannot testify similarly, but I know we grew up being concerned, fearful at times, and worried at other times, and hoping you just didn't see. So those things scared you from time to time. and it was part of growing up, as I said, in the country. Yes, so perhaps we can move on to our feature. I don't think Shabaka might be coming on again.
Right.
Or
So
if he comes,
just one, I just want to do a small, sorry, Dr. Fergus, a small, I guess, highlight of a sort. This Sunday, well, Sunday gone, I think that would have been the 9th.
the vigil. Yeah, the
Yes, the
vigil.
Vigil for Peace. Bayo Jackson, David Mohammed, and Ms. Zakia Uzuma Wadada of the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago would have come together to plan and host this Vigil of Peace. So it was well attended. I think the newspaper said there were like over 200 persons. Sorry, David Abdullah. Sorry, David Abdullah of the MSJ. Um, Over 200 persons would have attended. I remember Ms. Zaki speaking to us about it and said there were representation across cultural and religious organizations, because I think persons really understand that we are really at a critical point in the region and how important it is for us to stand, to make a stance and say, no, we do not support any war here in the region. That's not something that we support. We already have such a violent past that we don't want to have a violent present or a violent future. So there were a lot of artists who were there, who were present, who came and just help to create a really nice vibes in the place. I myself, unfortunately, did not get to attend, but we want to thank all the artists. We want to thank David Abdullah, Abiyo Jackson, Ms. Zakia for, coming together, rally. And she was like, even commenting and say, like, we were able to organize this via WhatsApp. We didn't meet physically. Everybody had something to do and everybody had something that was urgent, but we made sure to fit it into our schedule to bring people together because they understand the importance of us saying the Caribbean will remain a zone of peace. So thank you to the organizers, thank you to the attendees, and thank you to the artists. Yes.
Okay, so we could move on to the next segment of the program. As I said, we are expecting to hear from Brother Shabaka from Colombia, but since he has not yet joined us, we are going to skip that segment and move on to the feature of this evening, and that is the discussion on Guyanese oil and the increased United States militarism in the Southern Caribbean. We have on screen now Mr. Gerald Perriera. I don't have a bio for him. So welcome, Mr. Perriera, and could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? Welcome to Indaba.
Good evening to everyone. Thanks for having me in your program. I'm the chairperson for the Organization for the Victory of the People, which is Guyana's probably only socialist-oriented Pan-Africanist and anti-imperialist organization. We're very vocal, and we call a spade a spade. And why I'm saying this is because we have political parties here who are absolutely scared to say anything about the Americans, the British, or the European Unions. Those countries that I just listed, their ambassadors behave as governors in Guyana. So when it comes to the question of sovereignty and independence, that is something that is trampled upon. But having said that, I'm trained my areas. I am, areas of education. I did theology with a PhD in what is called philosophical theology, because I always had that interest, and I did politics. So I've been active ever since I was about 15, 16 years of age. And I joined the first Afrocentric organization when I was 17 in high school. the African Society for Cultural Relations with Independent Africa, which was founded by Elder U.C. Kwayana. And I never turned back. So I worked with Kwame Ture in Africa. I resided for years in Libya and worked with the Libyan revolution. I'm a Gaddafi loyalist and will always defend the values of what that revolution stood for. So here I am in Guyana, carrying on the struggle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perriera. Since you are such a keen Pan-Africanist, I'm sure you would perhaps have some concerns about the changing balance of power in the Guyanese parliament. September, I think, yes, September, Guyana held its general elections. And I believe for the first time in a long time, the APNO, the party that is generally regarded as the keepers of the political interests of Afro-Guyanese, a partnership for national unity, which of course shed power in the past, but was eclipsed by the PPP Civic Party. And we are going to tie this into the oil situation a little bit, because Ghana started commercial production of oil around 2019. They have shot up to almost 1 million barrels, 900,000 barrels a day. Quite a lot of revenue is coming into the country now. And we know that that is always good for a party in power. But something curious happened. A third party came into the niche. This reminded me of what happened in South Africa with Umkhonto Sizwe coming in about 3 months before the elections and boom, moving into second place as the dominant opposition party. So eclipsing the APNU party. Could you perhaps give us some insight into the nature of Guyanese elections? I believe there's a PR system, but is it a fully PR system? Is it a mixed PR system? How are the seats allocated, and how is it that this third party suddenly coming into the scene? How does it shift the balance of power? We have what can be regarded as Indian-led party, PPP Civic, and of course an Indian-led second party, and the relegation of APNU. Tell us about the political culture in Guyana, the structure of the elections and so on.
Okay, listen, what happened recently in Guyana was in the making a long time. We had to arrive at where we are today. Let me tell you why I'm saying that. I was a member of the People's National Congress under Forbes Burnham. I was an executive member of the UTAM, the Young Socialist Movement. And that was when the People's National Congress, which changed its name to People's National Congress Reform, because after Burnham's death, Mr. Hoyt, Desmond Hoyt, who became president and leader of that party, shifted the party into a right-wing, in the direction of right-wing neoliberal economic policies. Okay? Policies that were imposed on us by the IMF and the World Bank. We were dictated to from Washington, London, and the European Union. So Mr. Hoyt embarked on a program of privatization. Okay? Because the neoliberal policies that were thrust on us, that came through the World Bank and the IMF, they brought in what was called the Structural Adjustment Program. You know, the Washington Consensus. They call it the Structural Adjustment Program. And when they applied it to Guyana, the name was the ERP, the Economic Recovery Program. Walter Rodney's party at the time, the WPA, referred to it as empty rice pot. Unfortunately, that party that opposed Burnham, although Burnham was pursuing a non-capitalist path of development, Burnham created indigenous financial institutions, right? Burnham talk was about making the small man or woman a real man and woman, because our economy was always the economy was controlled not by Africans. So Burnham had to create these financial institutions that will shift the concentration of economic wealth in the hands of other ethnic group and a particular class, right? A comprador capitalist class that facilitated work between the nation, our nation state, and their foreign entities. So when Burnham died, Mr. Hoyt privatized. We sold out the textile mill. We sold out. We closed the National Cooperative Bank, the mortgage finance, the cooperative mortgage finance bank, the agricultural cooperative bank. All of these financial institutions were closed. We privatized. We sold out state assets. So when we sold out the state assets, who had the money to buy it? Not Africans. Not Africans. It was bought by wealthy Indian businessmen. Okay? So when Mr. Hoyt contested elections and he lost to Dr. Chedi Jagan, who returned to office many years after, Dr. Jagan continued with the same neoliberal economics, but he was somehow reluctant because he himself didn't want to do too much, privatize too much, because one of it, somebody who was very close to him said that he was afraid that if you sell out the assets, that one particular group will be able to buy it, and the other group, mainly Africans, will be not in a good place. So this successive governments just went along with it. So in 2015, the People's Progressive Party, which was led by President Ramatar, lost the general and regional elections to APNU, a Partnership for National Unity. APNU, there's some small parties in APNU, including the Working People's Alliance, which was one of the founders was Walter Rodney. But the main political formation there is the People's National Congress Reform, PNCR. Reform, meaning they've abandoned socialist policies, anti-imperialist, all those things they've tossed out. Good. So they contested elections in 2015. The Organization for the Victory of the People, we ran in the elections in 2015. And we ran in 2022. But in the 2025, we did not participate. But back to 2015, we told people wanted a change. So we told the electorate, we said, vote, give your presidential vote to APNU, because when you go to vote, you vote as the general and regional elections. So you can tick the ballot paper, at the top for the party, that's at the presidential vote, and then at the regional level. So we told people, the electorate, give APNU the presidential, the general election vote, and give us the regional vote. And that was it. Then we did the same. We did the same in 2020. But let me tell you what happened in 2015. While we were campaigning for ourselves, for our organization, we were already also telling people to vote for APNU. But when APNU assumed office, they never reached out to us. They never reached out to the OVP, although we campaigned on their behalf. So President Ali, before I get there. So they left us out. So we were never part of anything. But they continued the same type of neoliberal economic policies. And what was sad was that all the big contractors who had the big contracts under the PPP government, when the APNU came into office, the same people maintained the contracts. My point, I'm going to put it in a nutshell. We had 5 years of black faces in high places, including President Granger. And they did nothing, my brothers and sisters, nothing for the African community in this country. Not one thing. So 2020, the elections came, and they lost the elections, but they don't want to come out and admit they lost to the PPP. We participated and I saw it. But what is interesting is this, and I'm going to say it because there's certain people and forces who don't want to talk about it. But I'm a truth warrior, and I owe it the truth to the people. As Cabral said, tell no lies, claim no easy victories, hide nothing from the people. They lost the elections in 2020, but they felt that they could hold on to the elections and the Americans will say nothing. Why? Because I saw the skullduggery in the 2015 elections, and I doubt they won it. I think the Americans played a very important role in those elections. So today they went into the 2025 elections. APNU went into this elections here recently that we had, and the seats dwindled. They ended up with 12 seats. Now, a new party calling itself WIN, We Invest in His Nationhood, led by a businessman by the name of Azruddin Mohammed. He comes from one of the wealthy families in the country. You know, we have 16 people in this country who control the economy of this country. 16 families, sorry. So he is from this very wealthy family that traditionally has always supported the People's Progressive Party, the party that is in office. Okay. Now, there are things that we know about, but I'm not going to talk about that in the program. But there was a falling out between them. The father was a PPP councillor, and he resigned. There was a falling out between the Mohammeds, Azruddin Mohammed and his father, and the people.
Let's wrap that up and tell us what then is the fate of the APNU and the African constituency.
APNU is now in parliament with 12. They're no longer no longer the official opposition party. They are in parliament with 12 seats, and the WIN party, led by this Indian businessman.
Okay, let's bring in my colleague into the discussion. Renee, do you want to engage in this conversation? It's Guyana, similar to Trinidad politically, but of course we are seeing a major difference here with a third very strong party coming in and further marginalizing and disempowering the African-led or African-dominated party.
Well,
you want to come in?
No, I don't think the situation in Guyana is much different or from what has played out in Trinidad and Tobago over time, where you have African, predominantly African government who is not seeking the interests of persons of African descent in their country, and failing to understand our, I guess, the history of African people here in the Caribbean and the legacy and how it continues to impact us. And so they don't understand that that there needs to be certain policies put in place to help Africans, continue along the path of development and attaining, and just creating an environment of equity within any particular nation. But I am particularly curious because the anxiety in Trinidad and Tobago is fluctuating as tensions between the U.S. military and Venezuela continues to grow. But Guyana is doing their best. Guyanese government seems to be doing their best to appear neutral on these tensions. What is it like in Guyana with the public, the average man? How are they feeling about these increasing tensions? And what is like the possible impact if there is a full-on military attack against Venezuela? How are Guyanese people feeling about that?
Well, you did mention something which is correct, that there's a lot of similarities between Guyana and Trinidad. You know, I was listening to a program not too long ago, and I heard Trinidad's ambassador to CARICOM, one Mirage. And when I listened to him, that guy, he came over as a strong defender of American intervention in the region. And he came over also to me as a Indian ethnic supremacist. That's how he came over. Now, it's interesting because Guyana, there seemed to be a tremendous amount of focus on Trinidad, and you're not hearing much about Guyana. But the Guyana government think they're clever, but they're just a bunch of, you know, I love the term that Mao Zedong, the Chinese leader, used for them. I love using it. It's called running dogs of imperialism. Not 4 days ago, the head of the U.S. South Command was in Guyana. There was a huge convoy here of them. And the normal thing they tell you is, you know, we're here for capacity building, disaster preparedness, cooperation, and so on. Well, you know, Sister Renee and Brother Fergus, that for years, the regional governments hold what is called Operation Trade Winds, right? Where the U.S. military participate with the regional forces, and France and Holland, countries with colonies in the Caribbean, participated. And we have the shipwright agreement. But this whole build-up now, this militarism, this build-up in the Caribbean is not about combating the war and fighting the war and drugs and all that. This is aimed at regime change in Venezuela. It is clear you do not fight the war on drugs by moving the U.S. aircraft carrier Gerald and all those destroyers and thousands of troops and submarine. You have to tell that to a fool. Only a moron will buy that. The boats that they have sunk, blown up, more than 69 people died, those are not drug runners. It's clear. So this war is now Trump is beating the war drums, not only against Venezuela, but against President Petro of Colombia. So we need to take notice of that. But the Guyana government is not only trying to deceive the rest of the region and the world and the Guyanese people, because this is not about the territorial issue with Guyana and Venezuela. This is not about it, because even if the Maduro regime is removed tomorrow, the territorial dispute with Venezuela will remain, because every Venezuelan, whether they're pro-Maduro or anti-Maduro, they all believe that their Essequibo belong to Venezuela. So let's get that out the way. So if Maduro goes, that's not going to shift it. The United States, I believe, and this is my opinion, and I think I'm right, I believe that for some time, for over a period, I think for the past year, I think the Americans have put down a base in our country, but we don't know. Because you notice Trump have just given the CIA authorization to operate in Venezuela. So you look at it, we share a border with Venezuela. We're much closer. So if are you going to launch an attack on Venezuela from Trinidad, and you're not going to have any attack taking place from Guyana? Of course, that will not be so. It's going to happen. So the Guyana government is trying to present itself as though we want the region as a zone of peace and all of that, but they're doing something completely different. And the two governments that are not really standing up to the United States is the government of Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana. Because Vice President Jagdeo and the foreign minister, they're talking about Guyana will not allow Venezuela to bully us. But Venezuela is not the bully. The bully is the United States. The U.S. is the bully, because the U.S. talks to our leaders as though they're overseers, and that's what they are. They behave like overseers, and they're treated like overseers. So a war with Venezuela is going to have devastating consequences, not only for Guyana, but for the region, because it's not going to be like Panama. It's not going to be like Grenada. and it's going to involve Colombia, the guerrillas, the armed guerrilla group, the National Liberation Army said that they will enter the fight on behalf of Venezuela. And it's going to, if Guyana and Trinidad is going to allow the United States empire to use these two countries as launching pads, a form of aggression against Venezuela, that Venezuela has a legitimate right to defend itself. And it will rain missiles at us because it has sophisticated weaponry that has been provided it by its allies. So it's a dialectical thing. For every action will be an reaction. So we want the Caribbean to remain a zone of peace. But we have leaders who have bought into the lie. And apart from buying into the lie, they are cowards. They're cowards. And I have a way of putting it. I like putting it because I've seen it. They are afraid of white people. I see these leaders. I have seen them in Guyana, both from the People's Progressive Party and from APNU. When they're before the white diplomats from the United States Embassy, the British High Commission, the Canadian and the EU, they actually, they tremble. It's unbelievable, but it is so. I've seen it. They're afraid of white people. And we keep saying that the only organization in this country that is not afraid of white people is the OVP. We're not afraid of them. We call it, we say what we have to say. And that's why some organizations stay far from us, because we've seen us too militant, too Pan-Africanist, because we're revolutionary Pan-Africanists. And we represent and stand for all oppressed people, But there is no ethnic group more oppressed and more suffering, not only in Guyana, but most parts of the world, than the African. And as an African, and as a Pan-Africanist, we can never be racist. Pan-Africanism is a humanistic project. But I believe, as George Lamin said, that the African in his own self-emancipation will emancipate all humanity. I believe that. So, and I, as a Pan-Africanist, I'm not going to point any gun at my African brothers and sisters in Venezuela. Why? Because I don't know if you're following it, but all the Pan-African groups throughout the world are supporting Venezuela, and the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, the African People's Socialists, the NC, many of them, they're saying that the Bolivarian Revolution is a part of the World African Revolution. And the reason...
Okay, let me shift the focus a little bit here. You indicated regime change in Venezuela is the prime objective. Of course, regime change has a purpose, and that is the resources of the access to the resources of Venezuela, particularly oil, although there are discoveries of what is called rare earths as well. Venezuela is also very rich in rare earths. With over 300 billion barrels of oil, a unique kind of oil in Venezuela. Guyanese oil, much less, but over 11 billion in reserves, proven reserves as well. Tell us, is the oil in Guyana, which is mainly maritime based, extending, it seems, if you look at the map, right into the Venezuelan border, maritime border. And of course, ExxonMobil, an American company, is involved. I don't know if it's the only company, but it's a major company involved in oil production. Is Guyanese oil a factor in this aggression by the United States against Venezuela? And how does it work?
Definitely, because you have to remember that where Exxon is operating from, outside of the maritime, in the ocean, where they're operating from, is part of the area that is disputed by Venezuela. But you have to remember that Exxon was in Venezuela, and for years, and what Exxon was doing in Venezuela, plundering, stealing the gas and oil, is exactly what they're doing in Guyana today. Exxon was kicked out by Chavez in Venezuela, and now they're kicked out of Venezuela, and now Exxon is in Guyana. Exxon pays 2% of the profit as royalty to Guyana. What Exxon is taking from us and what we are getting is nothing. Let me tell you, when the deal, the oil contract that the APNU government under Mr. Granger signed with Exxon is considered one of the worst contracts ever in the history of oil and gas in any part of the world. And when the PPP was in opposition at the time, Vice President Jagdeo said that if the PPP win the elections, which they did in 2020, they will renegotiate the oil and gas contract. They campaigned on that. And the question was put to us in the OVB, to me, and I said that if they win, they will never renegotiate. And the question was why? And I put it in simple language. I said, because they're afraid to challenge those white people. They got into office and they never renegotiated. Because Exxon is not an ordinary company. Exxon is an arm of U.S. imperialism. That is what it is. It is backed up by military might. So some people who don't understand the political economy of imperialism, there was a little row when Biden was in office. I don't know if you recall. Biden was saying to Exxon, he said Exxon made more money than God and they're not paying the fair share. So you had some politicians in Guyana saying, oh, look, Biden is calling out Exxon. Look, Biden is telling Exxon to pay up. But what they didn't realize is two thieves who went and they took a loot and they were rowing in terms of how the booty should be divided. That's all. But when you don't understand the political economy of imperialism, you will never understand the role of U.S. military, the United States military might, and Exxon. So this is not only about taking control of Guyana's oil, they have, and it's about taking control of the oil and gas in Venezuela. And as you pointed out, there's a lot of rare earth in Guyana. This is about the empire getting back, because we see the shift to the multipolar world. The empire is going down and it's becoming desperate. So Trump wants to take out certain key elements in the BRIC equation, the BRICS. So going after Venezuela will be one, because it's huge oil and gas reserves. Because the Trump administration, now you have the Trump doctrine, the Trump administration has built a corollary on the Monroe Doctrine. So Trump, like all US presidents before him, have always been contemptuous of our independence and sovereignty. They've never. If you study the Monroe Doctrine carefully, you look at the way US presidents operated, various US administrations, the removal of the Arbenz government, progressive government, the way they dealt with the Sandinista, Fidel Castro, the Cuban, all that. And last but certainly not least, Haiti. They've never recognized, or they've never, let me put it this way, taken our independence and sovereignty seriously. They see us as part of their backyard, and that they have some right, some divine right to dictate us. And this here is about regime change, putting in the puppet that got the Machado, that got the Nobel Prize for War, and put her in. And as she said, she will open up the country to the U.S. Oil company. The U.S. can come in and have access to it. That is what she said. So this is what it's about. This is about countries defending a country trying to defend its independence and sovereignty against the empire. So if Guyana and Trinidad is heading down the wrong path, our leaders or misleaders or overseers are heading down the wrong path.
Renee, you want to come back in?
So like in Trinidad and Tobago, you have to forgive me because again, a lot of our anxieties have been around this, what could be an all-out war. Correct me if I'm wrong. the Guyanese president has not signed on with CARICOM declaring the Caribbean as a zone of peace? I'm asking.
Oh, well, this is what they do. You see, they sign on to things, but then they do something different. Now, I just want to answer based on that. You said, Brother Fergus asked me a question, and it slipped me. How the Guyanese people are taking this thing. My dear brother and sister, the majority of people I engage with, they do not believe, for example, the colossal lie is, right? And this is why Guyana is greasing up to the Americans. They believe that the Americans will protect us from this so-called invasion from Venezuela. Now, many Guyanese I've met do not believe that Venezuela wants to invade Guyana. This is before the US start its build up in the region and all that against Venezuela. Okay? Venezuela has been under sanctions for years and the economy has been damaged. Now it is picking up. Why would Venezuela want to invade Guyana when that is exactly what the US would like? So that they can go in there and bomb the hell out of that country. That is what they would like. So we are being told that the US will defend us against Venezuela. But you know, our politicians are people who suffer from, they're not long memory people. Their memories are short. Okay? It's either short or they're just downright stupid. For years, and I just want to touch on this, for years, if you go and you look at this border controversy between Venezuela and Guyana, the US has always been in Venezuela's corner. Always. When President Burnham was carrying took solid anti-imperialist positions in CARICOM in the non-aligned movement and allowed the Cuban troops to refuel here on their way to Angola, the Americans threatened to bomb our airport. This was the time of Henry Kissinger. And the United States sold F-16 fighters to Venezuela to be used against Guyana. Why? Because at that time, there was a regime, a client regime. There was a puppet regime, a regime that aligned itself with US imperialism in Venezuela. And you had a regime in Guyana that was anti-imperialist. So the US took Venezuela's side. Now the tables have turned and you have an anti-imperialist government in Venezuela and a neo-colonial regime, pro-imperialist in Guyana. The US is siding with Guyana. So our leaders missed out. I don't think they remember what Henry Kissinger said. He said America has no permanent friends and no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. This is about taking control, as you rightly pointed, brother, the oil, the gas, and last but the rare earth. So once the US get into the US, if they start this war and they're able to, I doubt it that they will be able to occupy Venezuela, but let's say that they're able to do that, put boots on the ground and hold the country, then it will be difficult to get them out. No parliament can ask them to leave, no matter how much, because the Iraqis did that and they wouldn't leave. And the Iraqi militias are throwing missiles at them to get them out. So I don't think we are going to throw missiles at them. I think we are just going to protest and walk up and down and nothing will happen. So we don't want any war in the Caribbean, because a war, if they launch any attack on Venezuela, as I pointed out earlier, it's going to have devastating consequences for the region. It's going to be very nasty, and it's going to set back our societies, our countries. It's tremendous damage. And we are hoping that both Guyana, the president of Guyana, the regime, the administration in Guyana, and Trinidad, in the spirit of the founding fathers, of CARICOM. Right?
Okay, I wanted to ask you before you touched on the United States aggression against Guyana using Venezuela as a proxy. But if you go back to an earlier time, back in the 60s, you have an occasion where the United States and Britain would have conspired to overthrow the government of Jagan, remove him from power. So those two episodes in Guyanese history that involve direct involvement of the United States to change the regime in Guyana, one successfully, the other time unsuccessfully. Is that part of what you do to sensitize people to the real objectives of the Americans in the Caribbean? Because you do have a history, right, that is much more direct, recent, and relevant than Trinidad and Tobago. We may have had, covert activities in Trinidad, but you have these very explicit and overt episodes of intervention and overthrow of regime in Guyana. So it's much easier, in my opinion, to convince Guyana, look, this is just, let's say, another episode of the same strategy used by the United States, one to divide the Caribbean, divide the region in order to, succeed in changing the regime and controlling the resources in another part of the Caribbean. Is that history relevant, and how is it being used in the current context?
Well, it's very relevant, but you have to remember the time when Cheddi Jagan was premier of Guyana. He was the first. Cheddi Jagan was the first self-proclaimed Marxist to win an election.
Yeah, that's the period I'm going back to, back in the 60s.
Yeah, that's right. This is during the time you had the Eastern Bloc, the Soviet Bloc existed, and Cheddi Jagan said he's a Marxist, and he was elected long before Salvador Allende in Chile. So the Americans were never happy with that. So they conspired and with the British, and he was removed. Okay, he was removed. And even Venezuela at the time played Venezuela under Romulo Betancourt and Raul Leone, worked with the Americans to find a way to, the Venezuelans were never happy with Cheddi Jagan, because remember at the time there was a guerrilla armed insurrection against the Venezuelan government and Cheddi Jagan came out in support of Cuba. Venezuela accused Cuba of aiding the guerrillas and all of that. And they told Kennedy, they said, look, we can't have a Marxist on our border. So all of that led to the conspiracy, and so on. They removed Cheddi Jagan from office. But today, there's no Eastern Bloc. We live in a world today, most of the Caribbean, neoliberal economics. The PPP is not the PPP of Cheddi Jagan anymore. It's a party that has embraced neoliberal economics like all the rest. The Americans have no problem with that. Nobody's challenging the Americans. And whatever the Americans, whatever the Western embassies tell them, they go along with it. We know this. Someone was telling me that a drug dealer who was prosecuted and jailed in the United States, when he was released, he said, whatever the Americans tell the government, they go along with it. So we were telling guys, we don't need this guy to tell us. We know about this. So the Americans have Guyana. Our government do not, strategic decisions about our country are not made in Guyana. And the faster Guyanese people wake up to this, it will be better for us. So yes, they don't have to, in Guyana, they don't have to come in now and overthrow government and all that. They use the electoral process. They can remove, if you behave yourself, they can install you. If you misbehave, they remove you. They did it. They did it to the PPP in 2015, and then they install another one, and then they remove you and put it. So they control at the end of the day, unlike and this is where Guyana is different to Trinidad and any Caribbean country. Do you know Guyana is the only country that every general elections we have, the Western diplomats have to be involved? Western diplomats have to be involved in the process. Right? It does not happen in Trinidad, it don't happen in Barbados, but Western diplomats play key roles in terms of who are going in, who will be in, and who will be out.
Be a little more explicit about that. And how do you mean they interfere with the process?
Well, they actually, let me give you an example. In the 2015 elections, when President Rabatar lost, right? He did ask for recount of some boxes, of some ballot boxes. And initially, at first, the chief elections officer, it was said, agreed. And then that process was stopped by the then U.S. chargé d'affaires to Guyana. I wrote a lengthy letter about it, and the editor was chastised for publishing it. Good. He said there will be no recount. There should be no recount. And he told the then party to concede. Now, I know this sounds unbelievable. Do you know that when the PPP came back to office, they were referring to that, right? They were telling people that they were removed, but they say it in such a way that they do not want to antagonize the Americans, but they will not come out openly and say that the then U.S. chargé d'affaires to Guyana interfered in the electoral process. I was there and I saw it. This is what, so if the people of this country need to understand that even if you elect a party and that party gets into parliament, you cannot carry out any meaningful and radical transformation of the economy. Sister Renee spoke about about the way things are for the Africans in these countries. The Africans will never be economically empowered in a country where the wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few and we have a capitalist system. So we are not going to have any revolution now to abolish the capitalist system. So in the meantime, we'll have to fight for reforms and for some sort of a shift, one way or the other, for the resources of this country to move in another direction. But in the meantime, that is not going to come. There are a lot of Indians who are in poverty and pauperized, just like Africans. But African leadership.
Yeah, we believe,
Gerald, we believe that from time to time there might actually be the same kind of interference in the elections in Trinidad. We know, for example.
Hi, Dr. Fergus. We can't hear you clearly. You're sounding very soft for us. Hi, Dr. Fergus. We can't hear you clearly. Very soft for us.
I'm hearing a phone ringing. I don't get. It's my. Are you hearing me?
No, we can't. You're still sounding very soft.
Renee, can you hear me?
Yes.
Now we can hear you, yes.
I don't know what's going on. Gerald, can you hear me? Gerald,
Yes, I
can you
can
hear
hear
me?
you. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I was saying that in 2010, there were major suspicions that I think a company by the name of Cambridge Analytica, I believe, United States, also had similar concerns about this organization. It was an outfit, we believe,
had some kind of impact on the elections in Trinidad. It was never verified, but there was strong belief and concerns that Cambridge Analytica had in fact manipulated the elections in Trinidad. So yes, I believe that that kind of interference is something that might be going on all the time in the Caribbean, because we have never been able really to shake off completely the influence and power of the former colonial powers in the Caribbean. And so we are always vulnerable and susceptible to that kind of manipulation. And I don't see any end to it. So could we wrap up the program then? Any final
I want to tell you something, brother.
Comments from you, Gerald, on the topic of the evening before we close the program?
I just want to tell you something quickly.
Gerald?
Yes. Could you hear me?
Seems like everybody has disappeared.
No, we can hear you, Mr. Perriera, Miss Dr. Fergus.
Okay, so
we're still here.
Yeah. Okay, so would you want to come back in before we close the program, Renee?
No.
I was asking Gerald for his closing comment. Gerald, if you're hearing me, I'm not seeing you. Could you give us your closing comment? Right. So okay. I don't know if you want to respond to what I just said. It wasn't so much of a question. It was just, in fact, my response to a question that you raised. So any closing remark from you?
I just want to tell you this, right? And it's not really about me, but it's very important. Now, I spoke at a number of rallies in support of Palestine. And last year I was leaving the country. I was traveling out from Guyana on a British Airways flight from Georgetown that would stop in St. Lucia, pick up passengers and on to Gatwick, and then I will move on. When I got to the airport, the British Airways people said I cannot get on the flight. And they told me the reason for that is because the US border security said that the British aircraft, the flight that I was traveling on, Gerald Perriera is traveling on, is flying over US territory, which is the US Virgin Islands. So before, you're being prevented from entering certain countries, and now they're trying to prevent you. If you talk out against imperialism and against what's happening, they want to prevent you from leaving. So I could not travel out. I had to find another route. So this is what, and they told the British Airways authorities that if they put me on the flight, they will prevent the plane from departing Georgetown. So it's apart from interfering in the electoral process, they actually run this country. They can prevent activists from leaving. They're making your life difficult, even in terms of earning a living. But there are many of us do not come out and say anything, but now we have to say it. We have to say it. Because many of us have been under sanction for years, but we have not we never came out and give a lot of publicity. We just quietly took it and went on doing what we had to do. But it's becoming now to a point where it's overbearing, right? Absolutely overbearing. So that is what we're dealing with.
Yes. So you wanted to say something again? I'm not sure that I'm getting some issues with the system on my end. I don't know if it is a problem with the system itself or if it is my device. I'm having some issues on my end. So are you finished with that comment you were making?
Yes, I'm finished.
Okay then. All right. Okay. So at this point then, we are going to bring the program to a close for this evening. We want to thank our listeners on 91.1 FM. Thanks for staying with us till the end. And thanks to our listeners and viewers on YouTube and on Facebook. Thank you so much, Mr. Perriera, for sharing the time to come. I'm sure we are going to have you again on the program to continue this discussion. Is a very important aspect of
the developments in the Caribbean that we had not focused on before. So I'm sure we are going to have you again at some time to continue bringing us some highlights into how Guyana is facing up to the U.S. Militarism in the Caribbean. Thank you so much, Renee, for being with us this evening. We want to say good night. See you next week. The Africa Report will be back next week. And join us again, same time,
Thank you, and the
for
ESP
another
for the
edition
work you're doing.
of Indaba. See you next week. Good
Okay,
night.
brother. Okay, sister.
Good night, everyone.
Okay, good night.